You're listening to the Indy 500 podcast, where each week we break down a different randomly selected album from NME Magazine's Top 500 Albums of All Time list. All celebrity voices are impersonated, poorly. Thanks for listening. Please leave us a review, a rating, or find us on TikTok to see what we're listening to on a daily basis. Enjoy the show.
One, two. Shot two.
Check, mic check. This week's sound check question, inspired by a guest that you will hear a little later. We wanted to know what albums you have a connection to in your life or emotionally, despite not being a fan or knowing much else from them. So I'm going to let you kick off.
Yeah, no, it's a fun question, and a couple things did come to mind during the week. The first one was Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. It was just one of those albums that I heard, and like every long trip on a bus during culinary school, every trip down to Tacoma to visit family, like from Seattle, like I put that one on, and it was like my companion. But at the same time, couldn't tell you a single song that there's outside of it.
Yeah, and actually that would apply for me too. I actually didn't line up any other candidates for this one, but you just mentioned one. Yeah, like I love that album. It reminds me of a certain era, but like beyond that, and I've tried, but beyond that, nothing's really doing it for me. I mean, but that one really does it for me, so it's nothing against them.
Why would I put sausage on the pizza when the pepperoni is already perfect?
There you go.
Yeah, dumb. But the other one that really came to mind was, and I will say with a caveat that I like this band. It's just that this album is the one I listen to far above any of the others, and apart from maybe a few singles here and there. And that's Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. Now, of course, yeah, I listen to Aqualung. I've even seen them in concert. For as many albums as they have, even their infamous Grammy Award-winning album in 1989 that beat Metallica, I couldn't tell you much else. So for me, it was special just because I remember back in high school, our senior year, there's 4 or 5 of us in the car just out for a Friday night drive, probably after bowling and before whatever non-nerdy activities we were going to get into. Video
definitely
gaming,
non-nerdy.
RPG, pen and paper games, who knows? Probably none of that stuff, of course, or Safeway runs to get burritos. But we just put on this album in the car, and after about a minute in, nobody talked for the entirety of the rest of the album. We just cruised around, listening to tunes, and even if it's like somebody singing along or making a stupid pun or just like bringing up some nonsense, I can't ever remember a time where 4 or 5 of us in a car together would have had that kind of silence and just focus on an album.
No, there was.
And I think it was.
I remember the crowd. Yeah. There wasn't a 40 to 50 minute section of any combination of those people being together where nothing was being said.
No,
when you told me about this a little earlier, I was floored.
Yeah, it was. Usually the group is exhausting in a good way because you're always laughing or like arguing about something or who knows what. But yeah, at the same time, like there we were just listening to it, and whether or not everybody resonated the same way, for me at the time, a lot of the lyrics in it also talk about just the transition to adulthood, the young man of the household going off to war. And this is when a couple of our friend group had signed up to go into the military, self included. We were all going our different paths, whether it was college or military or who knows what else. So it was just a perfect album for a perfect moment. And like I said, even just the miracle of being able to hear the whole damn thing and interrupt it straight through this one 45-minute concept album. Like you couldn't even do that with Dark Side of the Moon or anything. So that's my pick.
It must have had something. Yeah, everybody must have had some kind of thing going on because like I said, I don't know exactly who was in the car, but if you're talking about 4 to 5 of our friend group, there's some guaranteed names. And as we had talked about before, I may have actually been one of them, but this is such a long time ago and is on the other side of a big purple hazy cloud. It's totally possible. It's totally possible that I was one of these people and just don't remember. But yeah.
It's only 23, 24 years ago. How do you not remember one specific album on a Friday night of a date and time I can't even give you?
Exactly. Yeah. For mine, So back in the mid 2000s, I used to work in a legal office where all the support staff would work and hang out in a back room. And of course, it was like a really varied mix of people. There were just immigrants, people who would probably rather be listening to R&B. There's me. I was probably big into like metal and electronic music at the time and stuff like that, and plenty of other people. But suffice to say, like none of us could agree on music to play in that room. Okay. But one day we discovered an old iTunes playlist of ripped songs on one of the old computers that was hooked up to some speakers, and it was just called rock. It was just called Rock Mix.
It was just magically like some treasure chest had opened.
Yeah, yeah. I spoke to one of them, and I spoke to one of the people who used to work there, and they had name dropped somebody who may have created it, but I don't know. I disagreed. I was like, I was there when that person was there, and I feel like we would have remembered if somebody had made it. I think it's a former employee that
it's
none
passed
of us,
into legend at this point. Really, yeah.
I think it was a former employee that none of us knew. But anyways, it became a default agreed upon soundtrack for that back room because it didn't belong to anybody there. And then on top of that, we all hated it equally. And between those two things, it's better than fighting over what you're going to play next. And true to the name, it was like a really oddly curated selection of like 90s soft rock and pop. So some of the names,
you're talking like Third Eye Blind, and Semisonic, that kind of stuff.
Precisely. The names I wrote down that I definitely remembered were Counting Crows, Matchbox 20, Gin Blossoms, The Wallflowers, Verve Pipe, Save Tonight by Eagle Eye Cherry, and I'm pretty sure there was some live on there too. Hello to Christina Ricci, their number one fan.
Ms. Ricci, thanks for joining us. I'll call you tomorrow.
I say that, and now it maybe doesn't sound so crazy, but you have to remember this was back in 2005. And this is way before anybody had tried to reassess like 90s radio rock at the time. So these songs are at best like ones that everybody was fine with forgetting.
Yeah.
We had just exited the 90s. Nobody thought we were going to be going back to these things.
They haven't done the 15, 20 year mark.
No, exactly. That's when people our age start looking back at stuff like that and being like, maybe there's something there. But it definitely had not happened yet. So you have to keep that in the context.
There's something comedically unifying, and I can tell you, like, from that same idea of working in kitchens with a lot of diverse backgrounds and interest, like, nobody ever gets their way, but somewhere in the sauce is, like, a way that everybody's happy enough, and we can all just laugh at the same dumb songs, and nobody wants you to put on a serious album. No.
It's the secret to doing that. But between the innate like true quality of those songs that maybe we didn't know at the time and kind of a sprinkle of Stockholm syndrome, everybody really started to love the rock mix. And like we'd do things like we'd develop routines where if the song You Only Get What You Give by the New Radicals came on, like someone would try and rap the health insurance ripoff line, FDA big bankers buying. And for the record, I had to copy and paste that. I did not remember it off the top of my head.
If you did, I can forgive you.
But at the end of it, everybody who was in the back room at the time would yell out the last part, "We'll kick your ass." So yeah, you mentioned Semisonic, so Closing Time definitely was on there, and we would always play that at the end of the day or when somebody was leaving. But
it's so annoyingly appropriate. Yeah.
It's definitely one of those. It's one of those things that reminds me of a time where you're like, I didn't know I had it so good working with a group of people who you didn't like, who you actually were like okay to anywhere from okay to happy to see.
Right. It's not everybody's that lucky.
Yeah. And the exact songs that were on there, we failed 90s soft rock. It never failed us. Like
it was just too soon or too late.
Exactly. Maybe it's cheating, but my pick is that specific playlist that hopefully still lives on some old computer in the back room of a law office, which was ahead of its time in recognizing that 90s radio rock would have its second day in the sun. So
if somebody wants to get particularly hard about the rules of this question, I'm sure you could go pull down now. That's what I call music volume 9.
Yeah, I probably
And
had
be
all
like
the exact
80% of it.
same.
Yeah.
All the
So
exact
like,
same
I'm
things.
sure it's out there.
Yeah. But
And if it's ribbed, hey, who knows? Maybe it actually is from a comp
yeah,
or something like that.
But definitely at
That's a good one.
definitely at the time, none of us had a big emotional connection to any of these songs.
I remember a few times in restaurants in the back of that house trying to play Closing Time, like ironically and annoyingly. And usually in less than 8 seconds, I was told to shut the fuck up and turn
Of
that off.
course.
So.
See, the trick is you have to have heard it like you have to have been forced to hear it like 100 times already. Because another fact that I didn't mention is that playlist, it could not have been more than an hour long. So every single song that was on there, you were hearing at least a few times every single day. And
so you guys ran it on repeat?
Yeah, it was the crazy. Yeah. It was the craziest thing, and because, like I mentioned, it was the one thing that everybody could agree on, and for that reason, yeah, it stayed on repeat in the back room, and I think that's why it drilled itself into everybody's heads and became beloved, just because that's all you got.
I'm generally curious if you remember, what was the reaction if somebody new came into the office? Was it just okay, and then within 2 weeks they're all part of the tribe?
Yeah, pretty much. If you're new there, you're already outvoted, and then on top of it, I'm sure somebody explains the lore of it. This is just something we found.
This thing just showed up.
It doesn't belong to anybody. Yeah. Nobody here is a dictator like forcing it on people. This is just the wallpaper of the back room here. I'll deal with it.
It belongs to everybody and nobody at the same time.
Yeah. But it was crazy how many times we heard those songs and that everybody lived with it.
Yeah. Are you still comfortable hearing those songs?
As I had mentioned, the whole genre did get it got a second look like recently in the past like 5 years or so. Especially now, like I can definitely put on a playlist of of course I've over the years at different times tried to recreate the playlist, and I'll message the people and try and remember what was on there. And you can get most of the way there. And really, if you just search like 90s radio rock or soft rock, like whatever list you pull up is going to share 75% of what we had.
Oh, totally. As long as you have Eagle Eye Cherry and Third Eye Blind, you're sitting good.
Yeah, those were definitely on there.
All right. On that note, let's play some totally not 90s music here. Let's drop the theme.
Hit the theme. Once again, thank you to Bear Jones for all of our intro music.
Yeah, we had a whole soundboard, and I was actually just going to have you pick a number 1 through 5 to see which theme we were going to play this week. But software is going to be software, not that easy to learn, I guess, sometimes. So.
Nothing works the first time through.
Nah, never. Cool, man. We're back doing a normally planned episode and not an April Fool's Spinal Tap dedicated episode.
I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as we did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The great thing was, too, the listening numbers just kept going up over the weekend. More and more folks put it on, had a laugh. And
good. Hopefully the word got around of the good news of Spinal Tap.
Totally. And we're only 51 weeks away from the next April Fool's. Never too early to start planning.
We could do Death Clock.
Ooh, now you're talking.
All right. Well, book it. Next one year, everybody meet us back here. We'll do Death Clock.
It's either that or the Lone Rangers from Airhead, but I don't know which one's going to have. Death Clock will probably have more material at least.
but Pit Stop has oh boy, I just messed them up. I was thinking Pit Stop. The Lone Rangers would have that one incident that we'd really be able to dig into. So you never know.
Yeah. We'll see.
Like we said, everybody come back April 1st next year.
It's a date. So what have you been listening to this week?
This week, I have been listening to, so as they often do, the Hives have re-entered the chat. They had the kind of new album pre-save thing pop up on Spotify and had a new single come out, which also has a music video, which was really cool. I've been a big fan of theirs since the second album, I believe, the one that went all real big and had "Hate to Say I Told You So" on there.
Yeah, when they had like their MTV appearance and everything.
Yep. I actually spent a little time trying to find the more thin guitar tone that they have, just sitting and fiddling with knobs and stuff like that, and trying to get it together. And I also wanted to mention, if you haven't given them the time lately, their last album, "The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons," is like way better than it has any right to be for like guys who have been doing this for almost like 3 decades, maybe more.
Yeah, no, that one was really good. It was wait, hold on. Did they go back in time and figure out how to write again or something? Like, usually that doesn't happen, but they did it.
Yeah, and one that I know we shared a little bit. I don't know if we both went through the whole thing or not. I didn't. I listened to most of it, but Wikipedia hole that I was looking at one person's thing, looking at this, but I was looking through Buckethead's Wikipedia, and I was reminded that he ended up being the lead guitarist on Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy. So that led me to wonder, is that album actually bad, or was it just all the hoopla? So I threw it on, and personally I would say it's not bad. It's not Appetite for Destruction. Not much is. I didn't have a lot of trouble letting it run.
Yeah, for essentially
what did you think?
Axl and some studio guys, it was fine.
Yeah, it does suffer a lot from the kind of time gap and like Axl losing a little bit of his vocal ability, but it's not like drastic or anything like that. It just makes you sad that he couldn't have got it together at the time and was still able to really belt them out. And then the very last...
I still remember there was like a VMA... Oh, I still remember there was like a VMA performance when Axl came out 40 pounds overweight and dreadlocked, and Buckethead was on the stage, and it was just like, what the hell is this? But at the same time, it was Guns N' Roses adjacent. It was cool. It was fun. Yeah. You know, why not?
Maybe they just needed to wait a little longer, because Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit came out and did that, and Fred Durst looked like a completely different person. Everybody was like, this is awesome.
now I love you.
Yeah. The last late entry I wanted to throw on there too was, I think I was scrolling through the Spotify singles, which is like a big series of covers, and I re-stumbled upon Arcade Fire's cover of the John Lennon song Mind Games, which is like a really good cover, but it also sent me back into their catalog. And I'm cautiously optimistic about their new thing. I didn't love the last 2. I don't know that anybody really did. But I was also thinking I didn't really like Reflector either until a bunch of years went by and I went back to it and I read a little bit about it, and I was like, I listened to it, I was like, actually, I really like this, or at least a few tracks on there I really like.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of the same thing with Everything Now, but I came to a similar conclusion where I'm like, there's 4 or 5 tracks on here like I do not want to listen to again, but the rest of them that I did want to listen to again, they're pretty good. So I've just got my fingers crossed that their new stuff is a return to form.
I figure doing a music podcast, we probably should know this, or at least pretend to know this, but do they have anything like coming on the horizon, or are you just speaking like hypothetical? Or
no, I'm pretty sure they have a routine they do where they like wipe all of their social media and start doing new stuff that usually revolves around a theme, and they have been doing that. And I want to say, I think you sent me a link today where it was like you have to download like an app or something, and you may actually be able to hear some new music from them. So it sounds like there is something coming.
Okay.
But I wasn't even driven to do that, to hear the new track. Actually, partly because one of the problems I had with their album Everything Now was that they slow dripped almost like half the album as singles before it ever came out. And there was like 2 or 3 on there that I just played to death because I was like, I think this is good. Is the rest of this album actually going to be like really good? But like by the time it came out, it turned out to be a collection of a few of those that I really liked and a bunch of them that I didn't. And I don't know, it messed up the experience. You showed all the
best parts in the trailer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It messed up the experience of having a whole album come out at once and listening to it. I don't know. I don't usually fall for that anymore. If
Yeah.
there's a bunch of singles coming out, unless I hear everybody's freaking out about it, I try not to dive in anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't seem terribly necessary, especially if you have the stuff all done. Just put it out at once and own the moment.
If
Guys
there's
do.
one, if there's just, I'll listen to the first one just because that's been the experience forever. You get a single, and
Yeah,
then that's like
a
the
radio song
appetizer.
or something. Yeah. Yeah, I'll go for it. My week, similar to yours, maybe in a little backwards order. For me, I continued the dive into electronic music, making up for 2, 3 decades of kind of shrugging it off. So, really enjoyed the Daft Punk Alive '07 album.
Yeah, I was really excited to hear you were giving that one a listen.
Yeah, even had it. I had to schlep the kids to some birthday parties and stuff today. Even had it on the car in there for them, and they weren't talking over it or yelling about anything, so that's a good sign. And then, yeah, there was one part of it where it was like the robot voices back and forth, and
Yeah.
my son was just like, I guess this is fine. It's weird, but it's cool though. Hey,
That's something that my son says a lot now too. I don't know if he got it off of a show or it's just him, but his new like catchphrase is, "That's weird."
yeah. Yeah, my daughter will often say that's random, or there's the, of course, that's sus. As the lingo goes. Yeah, so Daft Punk, jumping in more. What else did I put down here? Justice, spinning the live albums there as well, and both were pretty awesome. I don't think I could pick one right now over the other. Kind of a package deal for me.
Yeah, those two live albums for Justice are, I guess they have three, but I guess I gave you the warning that like the second one is almost a rehash of the first one, which is really weird, but I'm not saying
Hey,
no to more of it. But
exactly.
those two live albums, Across the Universe and Woman Worldwide, hit perfectly. Like it captures their eras just right. Like Across the
Mm-hmm.
Universe is when they're first bursting onto the scene and they're really reworking and trying to show you their personalities through their remixes of just that first album. And then Woman
Nice,
Worldwide
yeah.
is like them doing the Daft Punk thing where they like look backwards and they're like, it's almost a review of what they've done so far and what they like and what they've got like really good new versions of. Yeah, I love those.
I do want to look up and see if there's any like cool live videos on their
Oh,
behalf. I'm sure there's some stuff out there, but I'm just curious to see what their stage show and the whole setup looks like.
if you look up, you may be able to find a Blu-ray or a Blu-ray rip of something from them called Iris. And
Okay.
what it is, they have a super elaborate light show that goes along with the Woman Worldwide tour. And what they did was, instead of recording a live show, they took this entire rig and their sound system and put it into a like an aircraft hangar or something like that. And then they also made a huge floor of mirrors. So you have this gigantic lighting system on top of a giant floor of mirrors, and then they invited like some real professional filmmakers to come out and like capture just them and just the lighting rig in this space and the live show that they do. So yeah, you can definitely find clips of it on YouTube, but yeah, it's out there in full in various formats. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's one leg up they have on Daft Punk. Like Daft Punk never really truly captured, as far as I know, video of their like pyramid tour that went along with that Alive '07 album and the kind of breakout
Right.
2006 Coachella. There's definitely footage, and there's definitely enough footage that people have edited together like really nice looking versions, but there's nothing as official or as like clinical as what they did with that. So
Right. Not like a definitive work to say this was
yeah,
us then
yeah.
and at the top of the game.
Justice doesn't have a an anime movie that goes for the whole runtime of any of their albums. Duke it out.
That's true. They got the one up there for sure. Yeah, and then off of, we'll talk about it later, a little bit of the influence, but from Aztec Camera, I ended up listening to a lot of Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, kind of some older jazz guitarists, just to find the connections in the sound that guitarist Rowdy Frame was using. Yeah, and it was just a trip down jazzy memory lane a little bit. And like I said, we talk about it later, but this idea of here's this kid started off in a punk rock band, and a couple years later he's aping guitar progressions from guys like Wes Montgomery. So cool to listen. And then a guilty pleasure-ish of the week has been upping my amount of fish intake. I get to see him in 2 weeks for the first time. So definitely putting on a lot more videos at work and a little bit more on the car ride or when I need to put my head down at work and just crank a set. And yesterday I had on...
so do you get any kind of warning on what you should listen to if you're... or are there sets like just varied wildly by now?
And as far as I can tell, it's like going to a King Gizzard show where it's like you can tell what era stuff they're gonna play, and they have some of their presets, but how they play it, how long they play it, what songs 4, 7, and 8 are gonna be might all be different from night to night. So they just go into the bag of tricks, and I think the Seattle stop they're only doing 2 shows. I want to say enough to make it diverse if you go both nights, but at the same time, there's some times where they'll be at a venue for 5 days, and it's okay. You really gotta remember all the catalog
for real.
So
interesting.
Yeah, looking forward to that though. And then lastly, like you mentioned, Buckethead. As funny as it sounds, like with the jazz guitar, with Aztec Camera, with the EDM, everything felt so clean and calm. And I just needed some atonal chaos in my life. So like I had to throw on some Buckethead and just get some weird shit in there because otherwise, man, I need chaos in my life.
Yeah. Something that's not computer controlled.
Right. I love it. And even then Buckethead's beats, for the most part, in his drum patterns, he does program those. So total electronic bass there, but at the same time, like all the samples and guitar stuff completely out there. So it helps break up the normal stuff.
I was wondering if you could confirm or deny a story I had read about him during the Chinese Democracy sessions. I had read somewhere that they'd gone on for so long at one point that he had started to drift away and nearly quit, and that they had lured him back by building a chicken coop out of wire inside the recording studio. Does this sound familiar at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So the additional details, do you have them or should I go over them?
You go for it. Yeah. I know I've heard stuff like this before with him. And
okay. So the 2 things that I had heard were that one was Axl Rose's dog had pooped in or near the chicken coop and that Buckethead had refused to let anybody clean it up because he claimed that he enjoyed the smell, and like it went on for so long that finally people had to like fight him off and let people in there to clean it.
Wow.
And then also that he had somehow installed some kind of TV or screen in there and was freaking Axl out because he was watching porno during the sessions inside the chicken coop. Both of these things sounds like stories that he would have invented just to keep the legend of Buckethead going. But at the same time, like anything could have been possible during those Chinese Democracy sessions, like from everything else.
I was going to say that could have been something easily made up by Axl's people as to why they had to get rid of him. Are you sure that's made up? No, I'm sure that probably happened. But that's Buckethead for you.
Yeah. Maybe an expert can email us and we'll do a pit stop on Buckethead's haunted chicken coop.
On, Buckets and Roses and Chinese Democracy.
That could be
there's definitely some strange compromises made to keep him in the group. When I got to see them and I was working security, this is 2003, before the Chinese Democracy album came out, he was touring with them. There was like a 5-minute break in the set where he put on a beat and did a nunchuck routine, like mid-set, while the rest of the band was off stage. And it's just, I don't think I imagined Slash doing that. But okay, you're not Slash, so good for you. I loved it. But everybody in the crowd was just like, you got 19,000 people there ready to drink beer and do blow and listen to Sweet Child of Mine, not see the guy at KFC bucket doing nunchuck art.
Well, you know what they say, if you can reach one person with your art, it makes it all worth it.
He reached me, man. Yeah, he reached out and he touched his brother. Yeah. Thanks for that, Bucket. But yeah, that was my week.
For the news of the week, I wanted to ask, has anyone here seen that new Tron trailer?
Did anyone see the movie Tron?
No.
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 No. No.
Yes. I mean, no. No.
I'll say yes. I saw it.
Yeah,
I was blown away.
I'm going to join Chief Wiggum there and tell you that yes, I have also seen that.
Yeah.
But the main reason I wanted to bring it up is because that is heralding the arrival of new Nine Inch Nails music, which we have not had for quite a while. I don't know. Do you know how long it's been since we've had branded Nine Inch Nails music?
It's been a bit. I couldn't give you an exact date off the top of my head, and I feel like a lot of the last decade has been just pushing out the occasional jam session or like
it's been a little the last ones that we've received have been kind of something a little different, not exactly what we expect from Nine Inch Nails, but
it's, I don't know, we obviously haven't heard it yet, but it feels like, from what I understand, he's still working with Atticus Ross. So is it simply Nine Inch Nails because it's suited to an industrial sound as opposed to just Trent and Atticus making a film soundtrack?
So from the info that I've seen, it is Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross composing a film score, but because they're taking on the name Nine Inch Nails, it's supposed to influence. Like the quote here I've got says, when talking about Tron Ares, Reznor explained that taking the Nine Inch Nails name and influenced their approach to scoring, putting them in a grittier mindset and allowing them to, quote, play by different rules. And reportedly Disney was very pleased with it.
Yeah, I think if you can't have rage and anger and all these things to sing to and to create music to, you can at least have some pretty cool context to create some sounds to. And I think we'll see how the movie ultimately is. He's always done great work on soundtracks and scores, so there's no need to think he's doing it under the Nine Inch Nails banner now. If he resonates with the plot of the movie, it's going to be good.
Yeah, and it did. The trailer was a little darker and grittier Tron with some real world violence involved. So I can see how it fits. And I don't know if you've thrown it on anytime recently, but the last Tron movie, a big selling point was that the entire soundtrack was by Daft Punk. And that was all. That was.
I did listen to that this week. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also a return by them. I'd have to look up the year. I think it may have actually been after the
I want to say like 2010 or so.
Yeah, it was after the 07 stuff. So it was a half step of theirs to returning to making albums. But yeah, that score is pretty awesome. So if you haven't seen that movie, it's worth seeing even just for that. And if you don't have time for a movie, throw on the recorded version or the album version of it.
You remember that part in the trailer where the guy's riding the bike and then he cuts in front of the other guy and the guy gets sawed in half by the red beam coming out of his bike?
Yeah.
That was awesome. So good.
Precisely.
Yeah. All right, we went to the virtual reality world with Tron. Should we wander over to the multiverse?
Yeah, hit me with the Tron beam and send me to the other universe.
What do you know about the multiverse?
The multiverse. Fizz had his theories. He believed it was real and dangerous.
Well, he was right about both.
Exactly. Very dangerous. This has been a dangerous segment. So here we go. One more time. If we were in another universe where we were reviewing the Rolling Stone top 500 albums, we would have been looking at The Last Splash by The Breeders, which is, let me double check here. I don't want to be wrong, but I believe that's, Kim Deal's side band from the Pixies. And I believe that project caused a little bit of a schism between her and Frank Black because she scored a couple of hits on there, and he was not so happy that it was not happening under the Pixies name. But hey, if you don't like it, let her make more of your songs. Quit being such a Billy Corgan about
it. Well said.
If we were a podcast that was reviewing movies, and we may have been taking our list from the IMDb Top 1000 by user rating, and if we did that, the album. And of course, we should have mentioned that we're taking number 293 off of all these lists.
There we go.
Because, as I don't think we formally mentioned it just yet, the album that we're reviewing this week is number 293 on the Enemy Top 500 list, which is Aztec Camera's Highland Hard Rain. The Breeders' Last Bash is number 293 on the Rolling Stone Top 500. And number 293 on the IMDb Top 1000 by user rating is Boys in the Hood. I've actually not seen that one. I know it's a classic. I know I should have seen it.
John Singleton?
Correct. Directed by John Singleton.
Yeah.
Who also directed...
It's been a bit, but it's really good.
Yeah, who also directed Too Fast, Too Furious, and I believe Poetic Justice. Yeah. If you need to know more about John Singleton, I know the Blank Check podcast did a series on all of his movies, so check that out.
Oh, nice.
So it stars Ice Cube and Cuba Gooding Jr., and the description of it read, follows the lives of three young men living in the Crenshaw ghetto of Los Angeles, dissecting questions of race, relationships, violence, and their future prospects.
Yeah.
The website Ranker has a list of the top 500 guitarists of all time, and number 293 on that list is Adam Jones from Tool. So how do you feel about 293 other guitarists being ahead of Adam Jones from Tool? And I
think he's one of the more important of the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing... He writes really good riffs, but there's nothing to me that suggests like he's overly skillful. I'm sure he's a professional, so I'm sure he is, but he just doesn't necessarily play that way.
Yeah. So maybe if we were talking about like top 500 guitar songwriters or top
100 riff makers, he'd be top 20.
Yeah. There you go. And then in honor of the stock market taking one to the dome on Friday and this weekend, thanks to our president's tariffs, I also pulled out number 293 from 2024's Fortune 500, which is the 500 most valuable companies in America. And number 293 on that list is the Tractor Supply Company, which is a chain of hardware stores. They're abbreviated on the stock market as TSCO. They're based in Brentwood, Tennessee. And in 2024, they had a revenue of $14 billion with about $1 billion in profit. If I was doing the math correct, the list I looked up said like it was a number, but it was in millions. So I had to convert that. I didn't break out a calculator or anything. If I'm wrong, I don't know.
If any financial whizzes catch us, then good for you.
If Tractor Supply Company wants to take it up with us, buy an ad read.
We will, we will make it right.
So I also checked how their stock was doing today, and they are down 6%, along with basically everybody else. Good luck out there.
They're doing better than Tesla.
Good luck out there, guys. Yep.
Good Lord.
Speaking of people who should be paying for time on our podcast, we do have a new sponsor this week. It's something a little different that we haven't had before, right?
Yeah, I'm just surprised that this guy would even spend money. He hates the word sellout so much that here he is having us hawk something for him.
Yeah, but you have to do promotional work when you've got a project like this going on. Did he have a little soundtrack he wanted behind the live ad read?
Yeah, let me pull that up though. Right. Yeah, odd, but
okay, Johnny Rotten's Bitter Boomer Festival.
Because everything was better in 1977.
Are you tired of kids these days with their TikToks and their feelings? Do you long for the good old days when your rebellion actually meant something and just wasn't a hashtag like theirs? Do you still think Sid would agree with you?
Spread all evidence.
Then grab your creaky joints, anti-woke attitude, and your last shred of punk credibility for Johnny Rotten's Bitter Boomer Festival, the only event where everything sucks and it's everyone else's fault.
As for what to expect, rants between sets.
Yes, watch Johnny complain about literally everything while forgetting that he has become the very thing he used to hate.
Tribute Band Battle Royale.
It's the Anarchy Antiques versus the Filthy Lucre Lads. Who will forget their lyrics first?
Senior Mosh Pit.
Yes, their specially padded venue will ensure that you can still rock out without breaking a hip.
And no cell phones allowed. Not because of the punk ethos, because we can't figure out how to use all these goddamn apps.
And there will also be overpriced warm beer, because nothing here should be enjoyable.
Salt-free fish and chips for your aging arteries.
Never mind the vegan options tent. Hope you like mystery meat pies.
And don't forget about the limited edition merch, God Save My Knees, custom orthopedic Doc Martens, and a personally signed note from Johnny telling your kids they have to call you.
Yes, the location it's being held at will be a disused parking lot behind a Tesco's. Tickets will be starting at £77, but expect hidden fees because of capitalism.
Come relive the anger, the attitude, and the arthritis at Johnny Rotten's Bitter Boomer Festival.
Because punk's not dead, it's just dead inside.
Ooh, look now before Johnny changes his mind and cancels the whole thing out of spite. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny. But yeah, he does seem to be kind of running on spite these days.
Yeah, exercise curmudgeon as well.
But we love all our sponsors. We co-sign all of it, everything he says and all of his politics right now. At least until next week.
All right, now to take us back on another trip in time to April 19th, 1983. Ready? Take it away.
Yeah, so I'll start out. We've hovered around this region recently. So, again, 1983 in general. Ronald Reagan rules America with an iron fist, along with Vice President George H.W. Bush. Around this time, they've just begun enacting a series of federal tax-cutting measures designed to directly benefit the wealthy in a verifiable, concrete way, which will benefit them for decades to come. And Reagan also claims that the cuts would later benefit everybody else in America in a unspecified, magical way, which has still yet to appear. Take from that what you will. Elsewhere in the UK, Margaret Thatcher has solidified her conservative hegemony on the other side of the pond as her Conservative Party completes a landslide victory in a general election, with their popularity spurred on by the victory in the war over the Falklands. She primarily spends the year battling historic unemployment across the kingdom, and she's actually starting to find some success managing to significantly grow the national economy and lower inflation for the first time in nearly 10 years.
All right.
So
This is a little bit on the up and up.
zooming in on April itself, the top song in America on April 19th, I will tell you that ChatGPT gets this wrong. It told me that Dexy's Midnight Runners, Come On Eileen, that was the top song. But that appears to be topping the list on the 23rd. The correct answer, I believe, is Michael Jackson's single Billie Jean from Thriller. That would be the top song at that time in the US. In the UK, the top song is, get ready, Let's Dance by David Bowie. So we're having a little bit of episode synergy going on. And speaking of which, the number one R&B song, and I'm unsure exactly of how this is calculated, but it came up on a site called Birthday Jams, where they let you know the top songs from your birth date. But the number one R&B song, according to them, was Atomic Dog by George Clinton.
Wow.
So again, speaking of kind of hovering around this era and having episodes that we mentioned before, which I realize is probably going to become more and more common as we go on, right?
Yeah, eventually the whole enemy universe is going to be just all over this thing.
Concentrate and say, we mentioned that producer on these episodes.
Reviewing a Radiohead album is going to be like an Avengers movie for us. It's just going to be everything.
Yep. The number one movie in America was Steven Spielberg's E.T. Some other films in the top 10 include Flashdance and Sword in the Stone. The number one movie in the UK, a slightly less happy affair, would be Sophie's Choice.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
About ordering a steak, rare or medium rare.
Yes, you can only have one.
Yeah.
Don't
want to be in that situation.
Yeah. In the news on April 1st, anti-nuclear demonstrators formed a 14-mile-long human chain across England to protest against nuclear weapons, symbolizing widespread public opposition to nuclear armament during the Cold War era. And also during this month, both the US and USSR would publicly test nuclear weapons in remote locations around the world. NASA's 6th Challenger space shuttle mission is launched on April 7th, and the astronauts Story Musgrave and Don Peterson performed the very first ever extravehicular activity in space with a spacewalk that lasts 4 hours long. Also later in the month, NASA's Pioneer 10 space probe traveled beyond Pluto's orbit, becoming the first man-made object to leave the solar system. And only 4 other objects have done that since then. On April 8th, David Copperfield performed his famous illusion of making the Statue of Liberty disappear on live TV. That was perhaps.
Did they ever find it?
I didn't follow up on those notes. Maybe look up get up a live cam, maybe see if it's still there. But that's noted as perhaps the high watermark for stage performance magic by some people. I can see that actually. Yeah, the 55th Academy Awards were held in April. Best Picture was won by Gandhi, which stars Ben Kingsley.
Ah.
It beat out E.T. and Tootsie. And I was unaware that the film Gandhi was directed by Richard Attenborough, a.k.a. John Hammond from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And also that he is
cool.
Also he's the brother of Sir David Attenborough, the famous BBC natural historian and biologist. And Meryl Streep won.
The English Werner Herzog, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And Meryl Streep won Best Actress for Sophie's Choice. Elsewhere in April, Chicago elected its very first black mayor, Harold Washington. Alice Walker won the Pulitzer Prize for the novel The Color Purple. Britain introduced the £1 coin for the very first time ever. And John Elway became the first pick in the NFL draft, going to the Colts, who were then from Baltimore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah. And we're in April right now, so we should be coming up on our own NFL draft not too long from now.
That's right. We forgot to include the preview on last week's episode, but rest assured it'll get there.
Yep. People born in April of 1983 include supermodel Miranda Kerr, NFL quarterback Jay Cutler, actress Gabri Sidibe, noted insane person. Yep, correct. Noted insane person Eric Andre. Corey Harrison from the History Channel's hit reality show Pawn Stars. And 30 Seconds to Mars bassist Steve Aiello. And I know you're wondering it. I did check, and he is not the son of Danny Aiello.
You know what I was going to ask.
Yep, I saw that coming a mile away. The one notable death in April of 1983 was blues legend Muddy Waters.
Oh.
Yeah. Once again, threading our episodes here with legends.
Yeah. We got 30 Seconds of Mars, but we lost Muddy Waters. So I guess, I don't know.
Was the trade worth it?
Only time will tell.
Yes. So
I understand you do have a little extra treat for us too this week.
Yeah, we do. So as we move on into our actual segment on the album by Aztec Camera, Highland, Hard Rain, through a little bit of a coincidence and a little bit of luck, the universe threw us or guided us to an expert on this week's album. And just when we needed one, because when you do listen to that segment where we rolled the random number generator and pulled this up, I think it was pretty clear that neither one of us had any idea who Aztec Camera were or what this album was.
I figured that was the April Fool's prank you were playing on me, honestly, at the time.
Yeah. What? Aztec? What's an Aztec Camera?
Oh, I'm just going to pick 6 words and say it to Helios and see what happens.
Yeah. But the expert that we found, her name is Michele Catalano, and she is the creator and editor of a website called IHaveThatOnVinyl.com. We'll let her introduce herself in the actual interview clip. But before we play it, I did have a few notes. Number one, I, Brady, am going to sound a little weird because I was sitting outside on a park bench using my phone's Wi-Fi hotspot, and I was having to use the microphone through my Beats headphones. Between that and the fact that I had to speak louder than I usually do, that is why I may sound a little weird. Number two, this clip that we're going to play is actually just a portion of the interview, the portion where we were talking specifically about the album mostly, and we're going to release an extended cut of the full conversation later in the week because we do cover a lot more ground. Basically, it's an awesome, fun conversation, and we'd feel remiss if we didn't give you the whole thing at some point.
Totally, why not?
Yeah. And last note, she was a little too cool and humble to mention it, but IHaveThatOnVinyl.com actually launched a Patreon this week. So for just $5 a month, you can join in and you can get things like best of lists and side stories from her site. You get to participate in polls, make suggestions, and leave comments and discuss stuff. And you'll get merch like stickers and buttons. So please go support a truly independent and worthwhile source of music writing, a really great blog, and an all-around super cool lady who was very generous in talking to us. So without further ado, this is our conversation with Michele Catalano on this week's Enemy Top 500 album, number 293, Aztec Camera's Highland, Hard Rain.
Hi, welcome to the Indy 500 podcast. We have an interview this week. We are talking to Michele Catalano, who is the editor and owner of the music website I Have That on Vinyl, which is described as a collection of collections and also a blue sky poster extraordinaire. So thanks for coming on, Michele.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, the main reason that I wanted to contact you this week is because on our show, we pick a random album out of the Enemy Top 500 list every week. And the random one that we hit, I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, because we did like an April Fool's episode where we didn't have a random one. But we hit the album by Aztec Camera, Highland, Hard Rain. And then I don't know the exact timing, but it felt like almost at the exact same time as when you posted an article about the album. I felt like it was fate. We had to check in. But before we do, tell us about the website I Have That on Vinyl.
Okay, it says it's a collection of collections. I have people who I write almost every day about my record collection, and I'll write little stories about what the records mean to me. They're not reviews or anything like that. They're just what records mean to us. And
Yeah, I noticed it's more of a personal recollection that's related to the album.
I was going for a blog kind of thing, and I think that's work. I want people's feelings about albums. I don't want a straight up review. So when I started the site, people said, I want to write for you. I immediately got about 100 submissions.
They were all reviews.
They were all great. They were all,
okay.
People pretty much got the assignment. They knew what I wanted and they went for it. I underestimated how much people want to talk about the albums they love and about their record collections.
That's so cool. I'm glad. I was wondering if it was the other way around.
If there's one thing I learned from hosting a baseball card podcast for a bit, it's that people love nothing more than to show off their collections and just brag it all up.
Yep.
So, I guess how did it come about and get off the ground, and how did it feel when it like launched and it was finally up and out?
What happened was back in the early 2000s, when I first started blogging, I bought a whole bunch of domains. My friend owned a hosting company and said, I'll host anything you have.
Nice.
So I bought a bunch of domains, completely forgot about them, forgot I had them. And the hosting company, my friend's hosting company, was going out of business and selling to another company. So they wanted me to, this was just last November, they contacted me and said, you got to do something with these websites. One of them was, I had this on vinyl.com. And I said, I didn't even know I had that. This is like fate. I need to do something with this. And I immediately had the thought of, what if I got people to write about their records? And within a month, I had it built and running.
That sounds familiar. I think making a blog and a website at this point is a little more honorable than starting a podcast. But yeah, we very quickly, when we realized what we wanted to do, formulated an idea. And when did the website launch?
I believe it was in December.
Okay. Because I was going to say I had a feeling that because our podcast started in January, that they were very close to each other. But that was also the time when I was like switching over to Blue Sky from Twitter and everything felt like it was
Same.
then.
Yep.
Yeah. So I
I
felt like something similar was going on.
Yeah, it was very late December. It might have even been after Christmas.
Yeah. And you'd never be able to tell because, again, you write every day and you have contributors. Like it's already a very filled out and like wonderful to explore website.
Yeah, I've been really lucky to have many people who want to either be interviewed by me or want to write for the site. So it's worked out really nice.
Yeah. So without spoiling anything too much, you did say on your article about the album that we're doing this week that you think it may be your favorite. Is that right?
Yes, it is. I came to this conclusion last year. I am 62 years old, and I just last year decided I have a favorite album, and this was it.
So it's one that you're sticking with because I know I'll do that, and then the next day I'll say maybe something else. But
I never said I had a favorite album. When people would ask me that, I would give a list of 10.
yeah, exactly.
And I never narrowed it down. And one day I was listening to it, and it just hit me. This is my all-time favorite album.
Can you give us kind of a recap of the article that you wrote about it too? Because it was a great
Sure.
story.
What happened was, this is back in 1983. I was working at Record World on Long Island, and I had a crush on a guy there, as people do in their young 20s. And I was sick one day and called off of work, and it was a snowstorm. And this guy I had a crush on came over to see how I was feeling, and he brought me a present, and he said, I just want you to have this. If you listen to it, I think you'll really enjoy it. It sounds like you. So I opened it up, and it was Aztec Camera, and I had briefly heard of it just from working there, from putting it on the shelf or whatever. And I said, oh yeah, sure, thanks. I'll give it a listen. I didn't know what else to say because here was this guy I had a crush on bringing me an album while I was sick. So he didn't stay because I was sick, and I went and I listened to the album, and I fell in love with it on first listen. I knew the first song, which is Oblivious. They had been playing that on the radio a lot. I hadn't heard anything else, and it was just such a beautiful, written, put together album. I fell in love with it immediately, and I was like, I'm going to marry this guy.
And that did
And
happen.
I did, yes.
Right? And it does sound like we've been living with it for about 2 weeks now and not. It does sound like the kind of album that a person may give to a girl that they're also crushing on. I can see as I'm going through it. There's spots where you're like, I think she might hear this and think.
Yeah, it's a very poetic album.
And I think my contribution on that category was Talking Book by Stevie Wonder. I remember sending songs off of that to my wife over the time of dating. And okay, that's a sentimental one for me now.
Yeah, and you know what's funny?
It works. Any music works.
Yeah. I can as I read that story and I listen to the album, like I could see it. And I was gonna say the funny thing is my music that I think me and my wife together, we'd actually broken up for a while and then getting back together, I found the cartoon Metalocalypse, which is like an Adult Swim cartoon about guys in a metal band. And
Right.
I was like, she needs to hear this. Like, I didn't know anybody else who might be into it because she's like the metalhead in my life. And I was like, I got to share this with somebody. And I've got one person and I wanted to see her again. I needed to like have her back in my life. And yeah,
It's always a good thing to do.
yeah.
It's a way to reach people. When you don't have the words, somebody else does.
Yeah, exactly. People forever have been you make mixtapes to tell people how you feel. A big part of the communication now between me and my co-host Helios now is the trading album. Because we haven't talked about it on the podcast much, but there's maybe a decade stretch where we weren't really in touch. And now we went to a concert together and now we're doing this podcast together and feel like a way to maybe like plan C of the podcast was to just have us reconnect too. So yeah, I really identify with having personal stories around this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody has a personal story when it comes to music and their favorites. I'm finding that out.
Yeah. Which tracks really jump off the album like to you?
The first track, Oblivious, because the track I knew of them and I had heard originally. And it's a catchy song.
Yeah.
Walk Out to Winter is my favorite on the album. It's got some great lyrics and it's just a really sweet song. I like We Could Send Letters and the last two songs, Back on Board and Down the Dip. Those are the ones that stand out to me.
Yeah. Just today when I was listening to it, by pretty much the run all the way from like pillar to post to the end. And
yes,
one thing we had talked about that maybe you'll be able to tell us for this one, but like when you listen to these albums now on Spotify, they don't give you an indication of where side A and side B split. So my guess was maybe between We Could Send Letters and Pillar to Post.
You are right.
Oh, okay. Woo! Because that's also where I felt like there's almost a change in style to the album. And I really like side two.
I feel like side two, they all flow into each other on side two.
Yeah, and like I think my favorite on the album is Back on Board. And
it's such a great song.
That one feels a little more expansive and produced, and it does directly at the end go right into Down the Dip, which is it's just the man and the acoustic, which is cool because those are like two of my favorite. That's two of my favorite things on the album: the travel from one side of what I really like to another. Do you know much more about the band itself, or is it more of a just pure personal connection to this album specifically? Because we don't. This was one of the times where we pulled a random album and looked at each other and said, "I've never heard of it."
I do have another album of theirs, Love, and I have one of my favorite things I own, which is a 12-inch single of them doing Van Halen's Jump.
Oh, okay.
It's incredible. You have to hear this.
All right, I'm going to write that down as something to check out before we do the episode.
There's a short version and there's a long version. The long version is incredible.
Okay. Yeah, because I haven't yet explored anything else. But whenever the album does end on Spotify, they always kick me to another one of their tracks, which is Good Morning Brit. And that one, actually, I really love whenever it does. Like, I almost never notice when I get the end of the album, but then that one will come on and I'm like, the vocals are a little different and a little different song. And then I look and I'm like, oh, this is actually another one. But I really like that one, even though I'm not allowed to include it on the episode, really.
I'm trying to remember what album that's on.
It's got like a green cover, and I think it's like a close-up picture of a person, but yeah.
Stray.
Okay. That's the next one I'll check out.
I don't really go that far with them. It's really this album in particular I think he's a wonderful lyricist, and I should really get more into the other albums and see what the other lyrics are like. But this album just really sits in my heart.
Do you have any last words on the album itself?
My goal in life is to get everybody I know to listen to this album at least once.
Okay.
I want everybody to go to their streaming of choice and put on Aztec Camera, Highland, Hard Rain, and give it a listen.
Huge thanks to Michele on that one. Guys, seriously, if you're here listening to this, either you hit the wrong button and you can't figure out how to work Spotify, or you're a fan of music like we are. I really encourage you to check out her website. There's so much great writing on there. And it's crowdsourced too. It's not just her. So she does have people submit other articles and other personal anecdotes and how they relate to records and music. And again, if you're here listening to something like this, you probably are going to really love that website. So go check it out. Thanks again, Michele.
Yep. Seconded. I love that website. And she is also an awesome follow on Blue Sky. So check both those out.
And the same username as well, right?
Correct. On Blue Sky, she is.
I have that on vinyl.com.
I have that on vinyl.com. Yeah. Okay. Your usernames there can just be your website, which is pretty cool. That's like their version of verifying. So, what's her and what's the website?
I guess, should we start talking about these guys? This Aztec Camera, this Mayan microphone, this Incan fax machine?
Yeah. Let's see. So I've got notes on the band origins. Did you want to go down yours first, though?
No, why don't you start and take the wheel once we get to a little closer to the album story, and they intertwine the origins in that first album. So
sure, okay. So Aztec Camera is primarily the work of lead singer and guitarist named Roddy Frame. He was born in January of 1964 in a town called South Lanarkshire. Yeah, I'm definitely going to get that wrong. I probably should have.
How do you spell it?
Yeah, Lanarkshire. Maybe I should have asked Alan Woodhouse about that one first. But anyway, it is a working class.
Lanarkshire?
Yeah, it is a working class town outside of Glasgow. And he started the band at age 15 or 16. Some accounts differ there. I did find a video interview he did in Japan where he mentioned that he had asked for a guitar and an amplifier at a very young age and had actually begun learning how to play guitar around 4 years old.
Wow.
And he says that he considered himself proficient around age 9 or 10.
Show off.
Yeah. So I had a quote here from a magazine interview with a magazine called Pop Matters. And he says, a lot of guys who were in bands at the time picked up the guitar because of punk, and musicianship was frowned upon back then. If you picked up a guitar in 1977 and went beyond your 3 chords, it was seen as slightly distasteful. But by then, I had been playing along with records by Mick Ronson and Wilco Johnson by the time I was 13, so guitar was my thing. I was never going to do anything else. I was just completely crazy about it by the time I was 4 or 5 years old. He notes that he had soaked up a lot of his early influences via his older sisters, who would play a lot of Beatles, a lot of Rolling Stones. He notes that he has always loved David Bowie. And he says he recalls one of the very first things he ever learned to play on guitar was Space Oddity, and he would play it over and over for his mom. May we all be so lucky.
Yeah.
And another quote from that article says, in 1976, when I was 11, my sister came home and said, look at this. Someone gave me 2 tickets for David Bowie's concert, and you can't go. And she showed them to me, and I had a breakdown. And I told her that was the cruelest thing that anybody had ever done to me.
Wow. Yeah.
Some other artists.
I mean, I hope since then he had the chance. Yeah. But oof, the dagger.
That's something only an older sister could pull on you. Some other artists I've seen mentioned as influences for him, he pointed out, I believe it's John McGeach from Susie and the Banshees as an important influence on his guitar playing. He often cites Echo and the Bunnymen, Django Reinhardt, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Roxy Music, and Brian Eno.
Nice. Interesting.
Yeah. And Another important influence on the band coming together, and especially their sound and their look, has to do with I believe it's the second label that they had signed to, called Postcard. And Postcard had its own, it almost had its own kind of scene going on in the UK at the time, and it was run by a guy named Alan Horn. So Roddy talks about Postcard in an interview with The Guardian, and I gotta, so parts of,
maybe this is where I'll jump in a little bit. Yeah, so like you mentioned, the band started when he was like 15, 16, basically left school at that point, and was in a band already called Neutral Blue. And that group broke up. They were a bit more on the punk side, and he brought along his drummer, David Mulholland, with him. In 1979, they already had some songs written that ended up being on the album Highland Hard Rain. And from the get-go, you talked about how he was cool with having some musicianship, despite it not being the cool thing to do at the time. He was very much like the leader of the band and dictated all the fine points of it, with the bass, the drums, how it all plays together. There was no confusing the fact it was Roddy's band. Yeah, so in 79, they had already recorded We Could Send Letters and Outside the Tunnel, like you said, with Postcard Records. And they were like a small indie label in Glasgow. And they could get some stuff out, but hardly the big time. They are indie. But eventually they ended up moving to England, and they signed and worked with Rough Trade Records, who was definitely a much bigger indie label in UK and had that kind of London reach and could get into all the big markets. So they saw their opportunity there.
Yeah, and like Postcard, so in that Guardian interview, they say Postcard, with its clean-cut image and pop roster that included Orange Juice and Aztec Camera, was designed by founder Alan Horn to irritate the serious rock cognoscenti. And they quote Roddy saying, Alan had very clear ideas about what you should and should not listen to. He had a middle-class arrogance I had not encountered before. It was, and now he's quoting Alan, the Byrds are good, yes is bad. And it said their attitude was, Haircut 100 are good, they're pop, we like them. It was a little rebellion, anti-authentic, against the gritty reality of rock. And it was a camp take on it all, which paradoxically became a byword for authenticity. So that kind of describes how they think of themselves and how Postcard bands were back in the day.
Yeah, I know. It's always so funny to hear that the band's called out catching strays like that. What did you? They're prog. They're completely different. Yeah, they're not pop at all. They're 13-minute songs.
Yeah. But
so at this point,
Alan says,
they're no. I'll have to reach out to him and ask him why. So they're in London. They're signed and working with Rough Trade Records. At this point, they meet up with producer John Brand, who Roddy credits as a great mentor during their time working together. And Brand had worked as a studio engineer with some pretty big names prior to this. Kiss, Rush, Genesis, Elton John, George Harrison, Bachman Turner Overdrive. Just going to pick those names up off the floor there. I dropped all those real quick.
Wow.
But definitely had the credibility that a kid like Roddy, who's 18 years old and headstrong and the leader and the my way or the highway guy, he actually kind of shut up and listened a little bit. So he does let Brand show him the ropes, make suggestions to make the music a little bit more modern. There's some drums or some tracks that have some synthetic drums in there a little bit. That was Brand's idea. That wasn't Roddy coming and doing that. But he really just wanted to give it some modern polish and modern vibe because all the new wave stuff was hitting big, all the more 80s type stuff as opposed to that 70s sound they started with. That was kind of the wave of the future, and they didn't want to be left behind. So ultimately, recording the album only took 3 weeks. The studio, as far as the appealing names go for the studios, International Christian Communication Studio.
Oh, yeah.
Probably isn't at the top of the list.
You can't say no to that.
But yeah, exactly. It's sweet in its own way. 50 miles outside of London, still in the big city. Edit that. Cool. Even though, he was happy with the results, Roddy Frame was saying he felt like he was rushed through the process, and you can ultimately hear the pressure in the music, which only the artist could probably sense that one. I wouldn't use the word pressure in listening to any of that album. but just an interesting artist take on how it went down and how it was made.
Yeah, I
So
guess.
during,
I guess
yeah.
when I listen to it, especially as a debut, it's very put together.
Yeah.
I can imagine the pressure of it, but it doesn't. He says you can hear it, but I say, Roddy, you can hear it.
Right.
We can't.
Exactly. Man, yeah, we just spent time listening to Texas Flood by Stevie Ray Vaughan 2 weeks ago that was literally put together in 3 days. You can hear it maybe a little bit there, but 3 weeks, get over it. It sounded great. But yeah, as far as recording went, Roddy Frame was counterculture in terms of he wanted to be against the punks and some of his music stuff. So a lot of the guitar, he was playing a 12-string guitar. Most of the bands at the time were doing electric with effects, or even like synthesizer.
You can actually see he's in the video for Oblivious. He has a 12-string Ovation guitar, and it's the type that has like the peacock feather sound holes that aren't in the normal spot. Yeah.
Yeah, those are cool.
So yeah, I have one. Not a 12-string, but a 6-string.
Oh, there you go.
If I can't brag about it on the damn podcast, where am I going to brag about it, right?
Nowhere. Yeah, nowhere. Yeah. Again, here's a statement that kind of just shows what I don't want to use the word pretentious. I'm going to be controversial for the sake of being controversial. He says that the album wasn't acoustic intentionally. It's just what sounded good to him at the time. So take that for what it's worth. Okay, it's all acoustic. Clearly you wrote the songs this way. No big deal, dude. Just enjoy it. Be proud of it. But one thing I did find in reading up on it, he did use a different guitar for every single song just because he thought, hey, I'm this rock and roll hero recording an album. I should be able to do something like that. Again, a little bit of ego, a little bit of fun, and just, hey, why not? If you got the guitars in the studio, let's use them. And then from a songwriting approach, they do talk about Oblivious was literally written to be a pop hit. They basically sat down and said, okay, we need something we can play on the radio. We need something that's simple enough, straightforward, captures the spirit of the band. Here's Oblivious. Side 1, track 1, radio hit.
Yeah, it sounded like a mission accomplished, kind of like, right?
Yeah, exactly. It set out, whether they're saying that in hindsight or not, who knows, but at the same time, yeah, it's a pop hit. Perfect for it.
Yeah, and Michele mentioned hearing it on the radio at the time that it had come out. It has that. It's recognized.
It did what it needed to do. Exactly. Got him exposure. One of the songs on there, Orchid Girl, he wrote as an ode to his 2 favorite guitarists, Wes Montgomery and Joe Strummer. So again, just speaking to the interesting character that is Roddy Frame, jazz on one hand and the height of punk at the other. The album was released and peaked at number 22 on the UK album charts and number 129 on the Billboard 200 over here in the States. I think that definitely explains why we haven't maybe come across this album before. Like, it definitely had a larger impact overseas than it did here. It made a dent, sure, but it didn't go to number 1 for 8 weeks, like a Michael Jackson album or something.
But it was
but the critical reception. Yeah, exactly. Any of these things, it very much is a UK Scottish album, even though it could be just as easily done by an American artist. It hit over there and it made an appearance here. But they did get a lot of good reviews. The critics viewed it as a more refined folk rock, something that could have been late 60s, which for all the attempts to make it modern, I don't know how that landed on them. But they went on tour with opening for Elvis Costello after this album was released. So that's a good fit.
That does make a lot of sense. When I had read that fact, and then the next time I listened to the album after that, like, there's 2 or 3 tracks on here where I could totally I don't know if it was an influence, but I could totally see them being Elvis Costello tracks. Like, of course,
yeah, very much.
Like, I'm sure he would have seen some. He would have heard some of these and been like, "Man, did I write them?"
Yeah. No, it's very much, since they got started relatively similar time frames. Both guys wearing their influences on their sleeve and kind of wound up with a similar sound. Genre-wise, it works well together. But some of the reviews on here grab some of the ratings, and it speaks to it was well received. Pitchfork, who gives everything a 1 to a negative number, they gave this an 8.3 out of 10.
That's
Rolling Stone gave it 4 stars.
Yeah, that's extremely high for a Pitchfork review.
Yeah, exactly. All Music 5 star, and then Spin 9 out of 10. So everybody was pretty high on it. It just, again, whether it was timing, crowded marketplace, whatever the situation was, it didn't have quite the breakthrough I think the scores would indicate it would have, but at the same time, still well respected enough and well loved enough to make it 293 on a top 500 list. So definitely saying something. But from there, though, they never necessarily had that same success again, critically or commercially, honestly. Their second album, Knife, was recorded with Dire Straits guitarist Mark Knopfler as the producer, which I thought was pretty cool. The follow-up to that album, Love, in which Roddy Frame gets rid of every other bandmate and simply employs studio musicians because he's tired of their shit. He worked with Mick Jones of The Clash and Big Audio Dynamite on that one. He's really getting some impressive names to help him with these things and connected, so there's obviously a respect within the musician community for him and what he's trying to work on, but it just never really broke big even after that first album.
Yeah. And I had a quote about the album Knife from the Pop Matters magazine interview. And it was Roddy talking about that follow-up being a departure from their sound at the time and not being as well received. He said, "The other thing behind that was that I really wanted to get out of that quote-unquote indie ghetto, that NME thing where only a few bands that sound the same get talked about. And I just find it so conservative that there was this small scene and everybody towed the line to keep them happy. Plus, I was young and rebellious, so I couldn't bear the idea of being some sort of pet for somebody at NME." So the podcast namesake, catching a few shots from Roddy Frame.
Yeah, a little bit, but again, it's just speaking to his "I'm too punk for punk" mentality.
Yeah.
I'm gonna veer left and turn around here too. But they did have that one hit that I think you and I had talked about a little bit. "Good Morning Britain."
Yeah,
that was one of the ones you had co-wrote with Mick Jones. Yeah, so a good song there. The next album, Dreamland, was recorded with Japanese composer Ryuichi Sakamoto, and that was his final album as Aztec Camera. From there, they cut the branding and just everything came out afterwards was Roddy Frame. Like, why call it Aztec Camera? It's the one guy. But yeah, as far as the staying power of this album, it's been reissued several times in the last few decades with bonus tracks. There was a kind of reunion celebration 3-night run of shows in London, Manchester, and Glasgow, where Roddy Frame played the whole thing with a full band behind him. But yeah, it's stuck around. It's had its up and downs, and I don't know. Maybe this is one that's just a deep cut that if you're lucky to find it, you enjoy it, but you're not going to find it very easy.
Yeah, true. So let's get into.
So as we.
Let's get into our thoughts. Let's get into our thoughts on the album. I think you got a preview of them, I'm sure, from the interview and talking about it before. But what would you say? Like, what words and scenes did this album bring up for you?
Yeah. No, it has a feel of being kind of light, summery. The flamenco jazz influenced guitar in it almost just has me like envisioning cruising along like some Scottish countryside or some Spanish cliffs, something along those lines. So it just feels very light and airy to me in times, especially those first couple songs on there.
Yeah, light and airy does grab it. I also wrote down slight and beautiful. The whole thing sparkles and lives in the treble range of sound. For most of the album, even the bass has like a very voicey kind of mid-range tone most of the time. The rhythm guitar, when it comes in, it's got like a punchy, jangly sound. I wrote down that it was like almost like a white folk version. And I mean that as not white folk, I guess maybe, but white folk music. The white folk music version of what Nile Rodgers was doing with his rhythm guitar. Yeah. And I may have mentioned it in the interview, but Another word that I thought of for this album is that it's deceptive. The first couple of listens, and especially when you come at it with that side one and like the first two songs or so, it does present and walk around as a very contemporary, like 80s pop thing. But definitely, and I was really glad that we ended up giving ourselves 2 weeks with this album to give a behind the scenes. We actually, and I think we mentioned on the last episode, but we actually spun the number for this album at the end of the Let's Dance episode. and then we did a Spinal Tap episode. And now we're actually doing the episode on the album that we spun 2 weeks ago. So we've had extra time to sit with this album. And I think that was another big coincidence that benefited me a lot, because really the more time I spend with the album, and I've listened to it a ton of times over these 2 weeks, and pretty much every single time it got better and better to me. Especially the side two, because I think they, for whatever reason, they front loaded a lot of what that producer guy Rand probably brought to the table with Oblivious, the big pop song that has the synth and the drums and stuff. And then side two has a lot more experimental stuff that sounds like it's probably more dear to Roddy's heart, like what he really wanted to do. And of course it sounds a little more acoustic when he says, hey, these are supposed to be acoustic songs. It just becomes more adventurous.
It felt very for our first album, it felt like a very well thought out way to organize the tracks in terms of just getting that listener confidence and that buy-in. You're already here because you probably heard the single. Let's start you off with that. Okay, we got you. You came back. Great. Let's work into a little different angle on that. And just as it goes, by the end of it, you're at a completely different sound musically than when you started off.
Yeah, like Oblivious, it almost starts to sound like Culture Club to me, not in a bad way, but like all of the electronics and 80s sounds that are in there.
Yeah.
It almost on that track kind of pushes to the background what really makes like Roddy unique, but you can't argue with results. Like it did become a hit, and it's not like he disappears in it. Like it's definitely still there, but yeah.
I mean, it's almost like how Let's Dance, the single, was on the album Let's Dance.
Yeah.
Okay, this accomplishes everything the plan was to set out to do. Let's make a hit. And everything else on here is gold after the hit. Mission success.
Yeah. And what were some of your favorite tracks or favorite moments from the whole album?
Yeah, so for me, I think Walk Out to Winter was one of my favorites. It's got this very poppy jazz leaning melody to it. Every time I hear it, it just hooks me and I don't want to stop listening to it. And I think it's just something, whether it's a Brit pop rock or even just pop in general, you don't hear a lot of jazz crossover in that sense. So I just think from like a music perspective, like it's just really interesting and really atypical of something you'd hear on one of these albums. So it definitely caught my ear there.
Yeah, I really like on that track, the guitar, it has as it goes through the song, it has a stabby jazz chord rhythm. And because I assume it's him doing both, it really smoothly transitions into becoming that sort of lead guitar style that he's saying that he really gets into and that he really enjoys. Yeah, it's like just the right balance. And I also wrote down on Walk Out to Winter that the other kind of weapon that gets wielded on that song and a lot of other songs is Roddy he's almost got like a lounge singer sound that he can do, or like a crooner, like a Sinatra type thing that he I don't think he ever really goes, okay, I think there's one moment on the album where I think he goes all in on it, but most of the time, like, it's just something that he's got going on. And I really like that. And I don't know if we'll mention it, but the song that I'm thinking of where he really goes all in on that is actually the track after Walk Out to Winter, called The Bugle Sounds Again. And I think The Bugle Sounds Again might be like the first song on the album that I really love, like capital L love. Like,
yeah, that one, I think first listen was one that jumped out at me immediately.
Yeah. So I think Roddy on that track, his singing, I wrote down that he almost sounds like, for the verses, he sounds like almost like George Michael, like singing English folk music. And the track like builds up and builds up. But the title line, when he lets that loose, is the part where I think like he goes full Sinatra. Cause like that's the signature, right? Like Sinatra, like hitting the title of the track like extra hard. Like he did. Yeah. The bugle sounds again. But yeah, I love that. I really like that track. Basically, yeah, like everything from track 3 on, I have like absolutely no problem listening to over and over and over and over. And it's not like I have a big problem with the first two. Like the way he talks about them, and he says, "Oh, these were supposed to be acoustic, and we really tried to make a hit song." Okay, like maybe those two you don't love, yourself as much. Right. But yeah, everything. Walk Out to Winter to like the end of the album, I've got notes on every single track. Like I can talk any of them, and I love them all.
Yeah, no, the other one I really like too is We Could Send Letters.
Yeah, me too.
And there's just some interesting stuff musically going on there. And I put down, I still haven't picked out the song, but there's a part in it where there's a chord change. It almost has a Nirvana.
I had a lot of moments like that
type sound to it.
Yeah, where I heard something and I was like, I know this is something people must have ripped him off.
Yeah. And yeah, it's, again, just going back to what I said about Walk Out to Winter, it's just something you don't hear in that kind of pop or rock music very often. A change like that, especially that in that context. So it was just really cool to hear, and it always catches my ear. And again, like you said, any of these at this point, I'd be cool listening to again.
Yeah, the solo on We Could Send Letters is face melting, as in so much as you can ascribe that to this album. And I wrote down that the song has an interesting structure too, because it has a verse and a pre-chorus and a chorus, and they all sound very different from each other. Like they all lead into each other, but they sound completely different. Like the slow verses almost sound like an REM song. The pre-chorus is one of a couple different places on this album where I hear The Cure. And I think they're contemporaries, so I don't think it's that he's being influenced really, but I think they must be both feeding upon the same influences. And then the chorus like totally soars with all the ahs, and another great moment where he sings out the song title. But yeah, that's just a great song. Pillar to Post, I wrote down, that's one of the few places where I hear him like really trying to make a guitar riff. It's kind of interesting. Like the rest of the album was a little more chord based, a little more strumming, but that one has a riff as a backbone to it, and it's deceptively catchy. That was one of the songs the first couple times through where I wasn't sure, oh, this one's okay, but I think there was one time I was listening to it where I had to cut it off after Pillar to Post, and then like for the rest of the day I was like whistling and humming the From Pillar to Post I'm driven it seems. Like that part, like
yeah. I think I had We Could Send Letters stuck in my head for a good 36 hours on Friday. It can happen to almost any of these. Yeah. And like I talked about earlier, trying to listen to Buckethead, it's not like I'm going to get Buckethead stuck in my head. It's not going anywhere. Back on Board is probably, it's like that's the one that kind of broke it all open for me. Okay. Like this happens a few times where for a long time I may not really get what's going on with a band or an album, and then one track, even if it's one that before you'd listen to and you're like, well, this is just part of an album I don't get, but then one track like hits and it cracks the rest of it open. Back on Board is what did that for me. Like the chorus sounds like the Beatles.
Like the lead guitar kind of slinky. It's got like a slinky lead that's like shuffling around that I love. I wrote down there's like nothing better than the kind of intro riff with the little sweep sound on the guitar.
Totally.
And then I think the moment in it that really became like revelatory for me is at the end of this song, he like replaces his own vocals with a set of background singers basically. And it's just such a cool way of showing how classically grounded in like rock and pop that all of these songs are, because like there's just this moment where he steps back and it almost starts sounding like a Ronette song or something like that, and you're like, this whole album could be this, and I'd love it, but it's just a moment.
And he did
it's just a moment where we could do this too.
You'd be cool here.
That one transitions directly into Down the Dip, where he goes all acoustic and just shows off like rock solid songwriting, which is a really cool 1-2 punch, because definitely the end of Back on Board is like that's where he's showing off production skills, and Down the Dip is where he's showing off, this is just me and a guitar, and this kicks ass too.
I can go big, I can go small, no matter what, you're going to be happy with it.
The next track, Haywire, continues the acoustic bits, but it also has one of my favorite experimental moments on the album, where it's like the chorus where he's got like either an overdub or like multiple people yelling Haywire, like it's almost like an unsettling kind of key type thing. And then there's like jazzy kind of cowboy chords in the verse of that song. And I really love that one. And just, again, like the whole run here, all the way from, I think we had decided that side 1 and side 2 get split between, I believe, Release and Lost Outside the Tunnel. I don't know. Do you remember? I know Michele had it, but do you remember where it was, like the actual side 1, side 2 split?
Off the top of my head, I
know we mentioned it in the interview.
I think we did. I can't remember.
Yeah. But just like that whole run, even from all the way from side 1 down to the end, Orchid Girl. I thought this was interesting because it revisits the kind of sonic land that they were in for track 1 and 2, where it brings back kind of the 80s sounds, the synth drums and stuff. But it gets married a little better to like the loungy, jazzy kind of form. And then like, again, it has breakdowns that show off his guitar influences and that kind of flamenco sound like you were talking about. And like, here we are one or two songs away from the end of this album. And again, like, this is another track where I'm like, I think the last time I listened to it, I wrote down, I love this song. I love side 2. Michele Catalano is 100% correct to have this as her favorite album. It's so good. I will never argue with anybody who comes up to me and says Aztec Camera's Highland Hard Rain is the best album of all time. I'm like, yeah. For a certain person, if it's yours, I don't have a word for you. Like, I can totally understand. There's so much to love. I guess might as well close it out. Queen's Tattoos. It ends on a left turn. It gets about as punk as it gets country too. I forget which one it was, but the Shins album also has a left turn like country track as well that it reminded me of. There's like,
and on a little high energy.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like chicken picking guitar giving way to like UK punk, and they sing it out with the haze and the woo woos. So good. So much fun.
It's a good end to a good album, I thought.
Yeah, it's a good goodbye. And it's another one that kind of sounds Elvis Costello-ish too.
Yeah, especially the early Elvis stuff where he had a little more punk leaning.
Yeah. So what was your, I guess we've mentioned it, but what was your familiarity with the band prior to this week on the Indy 500 patented familiarity scale?
Yeah, so honestly, if I could give this a 0 on a scale of 1 to 5 for how familiar, yeah, I would say a 0. With the caveat, would say 0. I'm pretty sure you're making this name up. That's how familiar I was with this one. But yeah, the pleasant surprise. How about you? Anything?
I think there's like an outside possibility that I had seen the name in passing, but I totally didn't remember it, and I didn't know anything about it.
No, exactly. Even when we texted Rick about it, I was like, he's not going to know this one. Oh, he knew it, yeah.
Of course. He's the guy who had the Enemy subscription or whatever back in the day, so if anyone.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Do you need a bit of a bathroom break?
Hold it for a minute.
For a little bit.
Do you think this one was? Yeah, I'll hold it. Do you think this one was like properly ranked and worthy of being in the 500?
293. I have a feeling that if the list were redone today, that it would probably climb. Yeah, I don't have too much to go on, but just the quality of listening to it and my feelings about it, I think it would end up higher.
Yeah, it's
in the real world, and like how much people would recognize it. I don't know, but in my feeling.
Right. I don't know. I do want to look into a little bit more if any artist down the road lists this as like an influence, or if this is just like a complete, total, isolated, cool moment in music that didn't really inspire too many people, but at the same time, like you don't hear many jazz, pop, rock type things going on, or things of the nature that came out of this album. So I can't say how influential it was, but it's a super cool album. I think it's worthy of top 500 recognition. But 100, 200, I don't know. I could easily see it going a little lower. I could make the case for it going a bit higher too. Do you think you're going to listen to some more after this week?
I definitely will. There's a lot of tracks on it that I love and that are catchy, and yeah, I wouldn't have any problem throwing it on. I'm sure it'll show up this week at some point.
That dog is back on the escalator. God forbid something should happen to that kid so that parents learn a lesson. Jesus. For those at home that aren't privy to all the pauses and gaps and wonder what the hell's going on over there, my dog has bothered me over the last 25 minutes for 5 milk biscuits, each one at a time, growling at me, barking at me, staring at me, gesturing to the dog biscuit box with his head. So... over it. If he does it again, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to record outside in the rain, probably.
We love our pets here at the Indy 500 podcast.
We do. They're wonderful, but Lord, go to bed already.
So for any of those breaks, did you have to meet up for a bathroom break?
No, I've been holding it the whole time. So, I really got to go.
Yeah, do you want to meet me?
Should we meet in the bathroom?
All right.
I'll meet you there.
All right. For anybody who doesn't know, this many episodes in, one of our co-hosts here, Helio Novell, is in another life a top chef, which is not a bit, as much as we love bits and as much as we love exposing Johnny Rotten as a conservative crank. That one's for real. So one of the things we like to do on each episode is a segment called Meet Me in the Bathroom, which is meet. And we have Helio tell us what kind of dish would pair well with the album that we have this week. So take it away. Make me hungry.
Yeah. So usually I come up with some sort of like weird conceptual tie-in and play on words. But this week, in thinking about it, I hadn't heard of this album, and it's great. So I'd like to expose the listeners to some Scottish recipes that are also great, just like Aztec Camera. It's a country whose food, you think of it, maybe the one dish that comes to mind is haggis, like a sheep's stomach stuffed with whatever, and it sounds disgusting. But over time, they've evolved a little bit. One of their most popular dishes over there is called Cullen skink. They definitely have an interesting language. The Cullen skink is basically a smoked fish chowder that's thickened with mashed potatoes. So like super hearty, super cold day, go work on the farm in the Scottish countryside and go catch some fish. And then to go with that is some Scottish soda bread, not to be confused with the Irish version. This one has oats in it, just like Miss Pac-Man has the bow in her hair. This bread has oats in it, so it is different. And they call that Fife Bannock, the Scottish version of soda bread. So really, some fun words to get thrown here. As Aztec Camera with your Cullen skink and your Fife Bannock. We're hanging on by the threads here. Yeah, so check out the Substack. We always put our rankings for the albums on there, as well as some recipes to go along with it, and always fun typing those up, and maybe compile them one day and make a hell of a meal out of it.
Badass. Oh, I wanted to circle back one time because there was one last quote that I thought gets to the...
Tucker, do you have something to say?
Lassie, is there a Roddy Frame quote that we forgot? He's trying to tell me that there was a Roddy Frame quote that I forgot to give.
Rowdy fell in the well?
Oh my god.
Rowdy's in trouble. Trouble?
Oh, Roddy Frame. Of course. The last quote I wanted to add, because it felt like it sums him up. He said, "It's like Paul McCartney," says Frame. "To me, giving your kids a good life in the country is more heroic than John Lennon doing the bed-in with Yoko. At the age of 38, I'd choose life over art every time. I get the impression that Picasso was not a nice man, and I would let the world go without sunflowers just to see Van Gogh with 2 ears." So interesting, an interesting take. And of course, that at 38, that's 20 years after Highland, Hard Rain. Oh, yeah. One other story before we spin the wheel. One other story. Roddy talking about getting to use his very first synthesizer. So he says, quote, "When I saw the Fairlight, which is a 1979 synth keyboard that looks like it has an Apple computer prototype sitting on top of it." He says, "When I saw the Fairlight for the first time and we started using it for the remade version of Walk Out to Winter, I was very excited by it. But the heavy metal band next door spat on it." And he laughs. He says, literally, he actually walked past and spat on it.
Wow. I begin to see why heavy metal doesn't get as much love on this list.
Yeah. Maybe Roddy Frame has something to do with the mystery of the missing UK metal albums.
I wouldn't bet against it. Yeah. It's a conspiracy. It started with the synthesizers bit.
All right. We've reached that time again. And for us, it's actually the first time in 2 weeks. So we have really been waiting.
Let's spin the wheel.
Do we have any wheel spinning music? A little noir,
light and...
late night. It's getting a little rainy here. Okay. All right. The numbers for me are spinning.
You might hear Tucker Novell in the...
The numbers here are spinning for me. I've made sure that we are looking between 1 and 500. I'm about to hit stop. And if we stop on an album we've done before, hopefully we'll be able to pick it out here. But here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. The number I have pulled is number 173. So again, yeah.
In the upper half, yeah.
And in fact... interesting. Did I say 173? Is that right? All right.
Yeah.
Enemy albums, top 500 albums, number 173. Led Zeppelin 3.
Who?
The little blurb says, "Conceived in a Welsh cottage without electricity, it's no surprise that Led Zepp's third album went back to basics, with Davy Graham, Bert Jansch, and John Fahey looming large." Interesting stuff.
Head for the land of the ice and snow, where the midnight sun.
That's where we're going to be. That's where we're going to be headed. Yeah. Initial thoughts?
Super, super as much as any Led Zeppelin album could be underrated,
awesome.
That's the one. Some of the back half of it is a lot more like just acoustic type stuff that's like amazingly good. It doesn't get enough press. Immigrant Song is like the hit off there. And then the rest is, I don't know, maybe forgotten when it comes to radio play.
I feel like I've heard Celebration Day. Oh, that's the deluxe edition. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I feel like I've heard Celebration Day. Since I've Been Loving You, I believe I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Braun YR Stomp, definitely have heard. Braun Your Stomp.
Yeah. Braun Your Stomp, yeah.
Tangerine. Yeah, I'm sure I've listened to this.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's very exciting. Let's take a look at some of the albums that surround it on the list here. Heading up the list, 174 is Bright Eyes, I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. It says Connor Oberst at his most saccharine. We narrowly avoided David Bowie's Young Americans album, which we talked a bit about on the Let's Dance episode. No, I probably wouldn't have turned my key. And again, the Young Americans.
Bright Eyes, I might have been disappointed.
176, Rufus Wainwright, Want One. Mogwai shows up at 177 with the album Young Team. Yeah, so Let's see what's ahead of it. Number 172 is Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. That would have been fun. 171 is Talking Heads' Fear of Music. Number 170, the Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream. We could have called up Rentabilly to do an episode with us.
So I'm trying to remember. Melancholy was in the 400s, right?
Embarrassingly high. I don't remember exactly. Man, we hit kind of a section here of, they're all interesting, but we really hit like an interesting section of the list here because right in front of Smashing Pumpkins is Dexy's Midnight Runners, Don't Stand Me Down. Number 168 is Portishead's Dummy, which I really would have liked talking about. That's an awesome album. Aretha Franklin coming in at 167 with Lady Soul. Oh, and again, albums that would have been megaton episodes here. Number 166 is Pulp's This Is Hardcore.
I know a guy or two that really like that.
Spoiler alert, whenever that does come up, Helio is going to pull out a cot and me and Rick are going to talk for 5 hours about
I'll just hit buttons.
You can do drops for us.
I'll play on TikTok and do drops. Yeah.
Helio gets to look at his phone for that one. No, I bet you'd have a very good time getting into Pulp.
I'll be the one that's fresh to it, honestly. Like I heard it, obviously, but
those, if you do get into it, that's going to be one of those ones that's I'm jealous of somebody getting to listen to that album for the first time. But that's us. Next week, I can't believe it. We get to go on an adventure with fucking Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. Don't expect a history. Don't expect where Robert Plant was born. But yeah, we'll give a little context later.
There'll be other.
I think there's a couple albums on here, so you can piece it together.
And this is latter day.
Maybe one day we'll pull them all together for.
We'll look more at the time and the specific era. For
exactly. Where they've been and where they're going.
You got any shout outs, plugs, dedications, errors to correct? Oh, one error to correct that I had. I listened back to the Let's Dance episode, and I knew I was going to do it a bunch of times, but there's a few times where I call him Niles Rogers, partly because I'm a really big Frasier fan, so it's just gonna happen. But his name is Nile Rogers with no S, so beware.
Yeah, the river.
Correct.
Can't think of any particular errors. I'm sure I made them.
I need to start writing them down because every once in a while I'll listen back to an album and I'll be like, oh, there's a fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think the shout out, you and I probably would both echo the same thing. Just again to Michele Catalano for her time and the great thoughts on this week's album, Aztec Camera, Highland, Hard Rain. Again, go check out her website. I have that on vinyl.com. Check her out on Blue Sky by the same name. I have it on vinyl.com.
Subscribe to the Patreon. Come on.
Yeah. You're basically getting an interactive magazine.
You're gonna get a sticker out of it.
$5.
Show me anywhere else where you're gonna get a sticker mailed to you for $5, and then the rest of it's free. So come on.
Seriously, actually, now that I think about it, that probably sealed the deal for me.
Awesome. All right. Another good one.
All right. Another one in the book.
Hit the music.
Play it out. Just to go on the record, no dogs were harmed in the making of this episode, but 7 milk bones were eaten in the last half hour.